We're going to open with a guided meditation that Vivekananda gave. It's an ancient Sankhya Vedanta meditation, calming the lake of the mind. So let us sit straight in our chairs, or if we're on the floor, spine straight, and hands as Vivekananda behind is holding them, loosely held in the lap, palms facing upward. Let's begin by taking 3 deep breaths, breathing in deeply and exhaling completely. Picture the mind as a calm lake stretched before you. Let your mind drift. See how thoughts come and go as bubbles, rising and breaking on the surface, becoming ripples that are ever widening circles. Make no effort to control your thoughts, but watch them. Follow them in imagination as they rise, break, and float away. I am not the mind. I can see that I am thinking. I am watching my mind act. Hold fast to the idea, I am the witness, watching my mind drift. The mind is not I. Watch the mind as a thing entirely apart from yourself. Identify yourself with God, never with mind or matter. Be the witness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Today's topic is devotion to the Supreme Spirit. Sri Krishna opens chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita by comparing this universe to a tree, not just an ordinary tree, but an upside down tree. In verses 1 through 4, he speaks to us. There is a fig tree in ancient story, the giant Aswatha, the everlasting, rooted in heaven, its branches earthward. Each of its leaves is a song of the Vedas, and he who knows it knows all the Vedas. Downward and upward, its branches bending are fed by the gunas. The buds it puts forth are the things of the senses. Roots it has also reaching downward into this world, the roots of man's actions. What its form is, its end and beginning, its very nature can never be known here. Therefore, a man should contemplate Brahman until he has sharpened the axe of his non-attachment. With this axe, he must cut through the firmly rooted Aswata tree. Then he must try to realize that state from which there is no return to future births. Let him take refuge in that primal being from whom all this seeming activity streams forth forever. So this is a very poetic opening. In 1984, Swami Aseshananda, disciple of Holy Mother, took a band of Portland devotees to the Oregon beach. And as we descended through a forest to the beach, he instructed me, Brahmaprana, pointing to the forest of trees lining the road. Vara, tree, is one of the most ancient forms of God. The Swami's statement had a profound significance. During the Vedic civilization, Indians lived among trees in the forests. They were called forest dwellers, and they received their education there. In the Gita, chapter 10, verse 26, Krishna speaks of himself as the Asvata tree, symbol of existence. The Asvata also means the people tree, which belongs to the Banyan family. So we are here, we have a description in picture form of the Banyan. In the 6th century BC, Buddha sat under the Asvata and attained enlightenment. And since that time, it has been called the Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment. But why is it upside down? Why is it rooted in heaven and its branches are reaching toward the earth? Swami Ranganathananda in his Gita commentary explained, because philosophy came to handle the holiness of that tree. And philosophy found that from the cause, the effect has come. The effect is visible. The cause is not visible. And therefore, in that invisible world of cause, beyond time and space, is the root of this tree. He continued, and in time and space, that root grows into a mighty tree called the manifested universe tree, or the samsara vriksha. From the one, the many, with all its differences, have come. This is called the cosmos. We are in the cosmos. Thus, from this imagery, we see how this phenomenal world, the universe, has its origin in Saguna Brahman, which is Brahman with Maya. And here we must note that Nirguna Brahman, the unchanging absolute, is beyond causality. So this imagery of the Aswata tree reminds us of another image, the wheel of Brahman. And this we find in the Svetasvatara Upanishad, which helps us to better understand Sri Krishna's symbolism. It reads, Svetasvatara tells us, this vast universe is a wheel. Upon it are all creatures that are subject to birth, death, and rebirth. Round and round it turns and never stops. It is the wheel of Brahman. He continues, as long as the individual self thinks it is separate from Brahman, it revolves upon the wheel in bondage to the laws of birth, death, and rebirth. But when through the grace of Brahman, it realizes its identity with him, it revolves upon the wheel no longer. It achieves immortality. So both the Asvata tree and the Upanishadic wheel symbolize our human condition. And what is that? We as jivas, individual souls, live in ignorance. But in truth, this world we live in and we are rooted in is Brahman. Our true nature is divine, but our individual ignorance has clouded that, has veiled that truth. And this ignorance is due to Maya, composed of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. While we live in ignorance, we're subject to the gunas and bound by the law of karma. So this asvata tree, though rooted in Brahman, is for us a world of samsara. That is what we are seeing at this moment. So the asvata tree holds within itself an apparent contradiction. The imperishable tree of samsara is rooted from above in Brahman. Yet asvata literally means that which lives only until tomorrow. So the answer is simple. Asvata represents Maya, universal ignorance, which is beginningless and endless. But each of us can individually sever and end our ignorance by attaining illumination, whereupon the asvata tree will disappear and we will see only Brahman. So let's try to clearly understand the asvata's deep symbolism and teaching. Its branches extend downward to this universe. Those who are on the spiritual path and seek self-realization and tranquility, the sattva guna, are the asvata's upper branches. And we see here the upper branches. And those who are bound by a sense life of passion, rajas, or lethargy, or tamas, are like this robber who's about ready to commit robbery, seated on its lower limbs. Its buds produce the fruits of our senses. Its leaves are the Vedas, which nourish and protect this tree of creation. Its vast downward roots represent the law of karma, which protects the tree by forming dharma and adharma from its law of cause and effect. Sri Krishna says, therefore, a man should contemplate Brahman until he has sharpened the axe of his non-attachment. This universe has come from Brahman, so says Vedanta. And Swami Ranganathananda explains, from the one the many has come out, and unto the one the many will return also. From the subtle to the gross, from the gross to still the more gross, until we see manifest the world of sensory experience. But the seer reveres this cosmic creation because he or she sees its essence is rooted in Brahman. For without Brahman, it could not exist. Maya cannot exist without Brahman, but Brahman can exist without Maya. Therefore, Krishna urges those of us who mistake this world of samsara to be solid, permanent, and real, to develop non-attachment. And Christ also taught this. He said, lead us not into temptation, meaning don't mistake this gross appearance for its root origin and essence. Don't mistake the illusion for the reality. Don't be mesmerized by the aswata tree's buds that produce the fruits of our senses, what we see, taste, hear, smell, and touch, to be so real and abiding. Don't be swept away by this magical tree of creation, which is impermanent and which lives only until tomorrow. For the Brahmagyani, for the knower of Brahman, who wields the axe of non-attachment, the aswata, this phenomenal tree, this phenomenal world, vanishes, and Brahman alone remains. And the Brahmagyani is able to peer beneath the surface life and knows all is not, God is. But for the Vijnani, who sees that all this creation is rooted in and verily Brahman, there is no need to cut the aswata tree, for Brahman was never lost sight of as its essence. First nirvikalpa, Brahmagyana, and then Vijnana. And we see the interplay of these moods, these spiritual moods, in Sri Ramakrishna's life. And this is what he taught his Vedanta guru, who had only the experience of nirvikalpa. He taught that this world also is Brahman. So nirvikalpa is a higher attainment where there is only oneness. But Vijnana is a higher achievement, a higher spiritual achievement. Brahmoy Vedam Amritam. In other words, idam, this manifested universe, Amritam Brahma Eva, is the immortal Brahman only. God is all. But this is a matter of realization, not mere lip service. And for that, we need renunciation and non-attachment to arrive at that realization. Swami Prabhupada explained, without the systemic practice of discrimination and rigorous renunciation, a lasting conviction does not come, nor does higher knowledge. And that is the key between a solid spiritual path and one who takes mushrooms or auxiliary hallucinogenics, because such a person may have an experience, but it's not a transcendental experience. It's an experience within a mind that is not yet purified. Whereas one who has developed one's inner conviction and discrimination, non-attachment through love, through devotion, through karma yoga, through raja yoga, through jnana yoga, that is a lasting conviction that becomes a reality. So for the devotee to break the spell of the gross senses, which lead us into temptation, which leads us outward to attach ourselves to gross manifestation and ignore its essence, Swami Prabhupada explains simply, the secret of non-attachment is this: the more we become devoted to God and meditate upon Him, the more attached we become to God, and consequently less detached to sense objects. Krishna speaks to us. Then he must try to realize that state from which there is no return to future births. Sri Ramakrishna in this connection asked a disciple, do you have any visions? Do you see any light in your meditation? Disciple, yes, I see a light. Sri Ramakrishna, that is very good. Disciple, but I don't want that. Sri Ramakrishna, then what do you want? Disciple, I want the source from which that light comes. Sri Ramakrishna then said, oh, that's a wonderful thing, but you will have to wait for that. Again, Prabhupada Swami explained, the truth is that we live, move, and have our being in God. But spiritual life means becoming awakened to that awareness. Otherwise, we remain bound by the law of karma. So to transcend the law of karma, it's important to realize our bondage is caused by the sense, I am the doer. So the aspirant strives instead to identify with the eternal witness of one's thoughts and actions. What we strove to do at the beginning of this talk through the guided meditation, to reconfigure the mind and separate out the higher mind from the lower mind, and to therefore watch thoughts, emotions, memories as objects, and that which we can perceive is matter. And this I, this awareness, is not that. This higher mind is pointing to the witness, the unseen seer, and it is that part of the mind that is located in the heart. That part of the mind which was observing the lower mind is the part of the mind in the heart that receives spiritual experience, experiences the spirit. So as an aspirant, we strive to identify with that eternal witness of our thoughts and actions. We can call it Krishna consciousness, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, the Divine Mother, pure consciousness within each one of us, which is our true nature. And how do we go about doing that? We step back from our ego consciousness, as it were, and allow our higher mind to begin to watch over our lower mind. And we can do this throughout the day. Swami Sarvadevananda says you can take snacks, 5-minute snacks, step back and watch. And that way, we gently guide our thoughts and actions to higher ground. By tying the mind, our awareness, to the feet of the Lord, we are then able to act without attachment. This is a gradual process. It takes place over time, over years. But we can practice it wherever we are. Verse 5, Krishna speaks to us. When men, and he's speaking to his male disciple, when men have thrown off their ignorance, they are free from pride and delusion. They have conquered the evil of worldly attachment. They live in constant union with the Atman. All craving has left them. They are no longer at the mercy of opposing sense reactions. Thus, they reach that state which is beyond all change. Sri Ramakrishna explains this verse very simply. There are 8 fetters with which a man is bound, he said. Shame, hatred, fear, pride of caste or class, hesitation, the desire to conceal, secrecy, pride of good conduct, and grief. He said these fetters bind one to the world. but after attaining God, one is rid of them all. So we have the capacity to evolve in such a way that we can break the fetters ourselves. How? One method is to give up strong likes and dislikes. When we strive to do that, we release ourselves from the inevitable. Satiety, when we become attached, or frustration and anger when our desires are thwarted. Turbulent emotions that disturb our equanimity. They cause a ruffle in the lake of the mind, so we cannot see the lake bottom, the Atman. At the beginning of his Yoga Sutras, Patanjali laid out the methodology for success in controlling the thought waves of the mind. In Sutra 2, Patanjali says, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the control of the vrittis. And what are those vrittis? Literally translate as whirlpools. They are urges, modifications, or tendencies that rise up. Memories, emotions, truncated thoughts within the lake of the mind. In Sutra 3, he says, Tadadrashtu Swarupe Avasthanam. At that time, when we have controlled the vrittis, the seer, the experiencer, rests in his own state. The lake of the mind is calm. And what is that state? Satchidananda. In Sutra 4, Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. At other times, other than that of the true state, when the mind is not resolved, silenced, or purified, the seer is identified with the mind's modifications. Another method Swami Pravrajika gave. For example, when you go to meditate or pray, think of that living presence. When you are walking or working, again, think of that living presence. Try to do this for 5 minutes, then increase that time. At long last, it grips you. That is how to proceed. Swami Vivekananda, in his talk, Freedom of the Soul, graphically illustrated how constant recollectedness can ultimately take hold of us. He said, I have heard of a man who lived in a forest and used to repeat day and night, Shivoham, I am the Blessed One. And one day, a tiger fell upon him and dragged him away to kill him. People on the other side of the river saw it and heard the voice, so long as the voice remained in him, saying, Shivoham, even in the very jaws of the tiger. So these methods help us to understand the Asvata tree of creation and to search and grasp for the root of the tree, Brahman, which nourishes the tree. Krishna says they live in constant union with the Atman. So desires and cravings are within every one of us. But with the knowledge of God, our hearts become so filled with bliss, those desires disappear naturally. So yoga teaches us to reverse the process. Use the revelation as a means to realization. Swami Brahmananda instructed. As you sit down to meditate, think of the cravings of the mind as mere dreams. See them as unreal. They can never attach themselves to the mind. Feel that you are pure. In this way, purity will gradually fill your mind. Practice the spiritual disciplines with patience and perseverance. In due course, you will be enlightened. When the time comes, the Lord will reveal his grace to you. Prabhupada Swami said, Nishkama, desirelessness, means the same as Purnakama, fulfillment, because all desires are fulfilled in the Atman. Unlike in our ordinary state of consciousness, where we strive to fulfill our desires, only to find that they still remain unsatisfied. Verse 6, Sri Krishna speaks to us. This is my infinite being. Shall the sun lend it any light, or the moon, or fire? For it shines self-luminous always, and he who attains me will never be reborn. Now we find the same verse in the Katha Upanishad, in the Mundaka Upanishad, and in the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Him the sun does not illumine, nor the moon, nor the stars, nor the lightning, nor verily fires kindled upon earth. He is the one light that gives light to all. He shining, everything shines. And this he is Brahman. So this is the nature of the supreme reality, the light of the Atman, the self-luminous reality that shines in this universe. And this light of the I am that shines in you and me, we need only unveil it. This light is self-evident and self-existent. Nisargadatta Maharaj explains this treasure hidden within us. How do you find anything you have mislaid or forgotten, he once said. You keep it in your mind until you can recall it. The sense of being, of I am, is the first to emerge. Ask yourself whence it comes, or just watch it quietly. When the mind stays in the I am without moving, you enter a state which cannot be verbalized, but can be experienced. All you need to do is to try and try again. He goes on. After all, the sense of I am is always with you. Only you have attached all kinds of things to it. Body, feelings, thoughts, ideas, possessions, etc. All these self-identifications are misleading. Because of them, you take yourself to be what you are not. So in other words, we come closest to that sense of I amness when we first awake in the morning, before we start identifying ourselves, who I am, where I am, what I must do. It's that first impression. And if we can try to capture that and prolong it, we begin to get an intuition into the self. Sri Ramakrishna said, it is impossible to explain Brahman by analogy. It is between light and darkness. It is light, but not the light that we perceive, not material light. And here we need to use our spiritual imagination. What is that light? How did the illumined seers see this world? Sri Krishna explains in the Gita, chapter 2, verse 69. The recollected mind is awake in the knowledge of the Atman, which is dark night to the ignorant. The ignorant are awake in their sense life, which they think is daylight. To the seer, it is darkness. These sutras, these slokas, are so powerful, based on revelation. They're not meant to just be read. They're meant to be lived. When Swami Turiyananda was asked how to study the Gita, he told my guru, you want to study the Gita, you read a shloka every day and meditate upon it and live it for a week. And in that way, the sloka goes deep into our system and begins to modify our thoughts. And when it modifies our thoughts, it modifies our behaviors. And we begin to get a feeling. We become the commentator. St. Augustine described that awakened experience. He said, I entered into the secret closet of my soul, led by thee, and beheld with the mysterious eye of my soul the light that never changes, above the eye of my soul, above my intelligence. It was not the common light which all embodied creatures can see, nor was it the same kind, but greater, as if the light of day were to go brighter and brighter and flood all space. This light was none of that, but something other, altogether different. He who knoweth truth, knoweth that light, and who knoweth it, knoweth eternity. Love knoweth it. So we see here, Augustine divulged that light as truth. And when one is flooded with truth, sat, existence, one is automatically flooded with its companions, chit, pure consciousness, the I am. And along with that, ananda, love, bliss absolute. As the Franciscan mystic Jacopone de Todi verified, indeed, love for God takes us there. Love above all language, goodness unimagined, light without measure shines in my heart. Verse 7, Krishna speaks to us. Part of myself is the God within every creature, keeps that nature eternal, yet seems to be separate, putting on mind and senses 5, the garment made of Prakriti, mind and body. Swami Ranganathananda in his Gita commentary tells us, the divine nature of the human being has never before been expressed so highly in any literature as what we get from Vedanta and this verse of the Gita. The eternal has become embodied in the human body. We embody that which never dies. Sri Krishna tells us, I have myself entered all living beings as a spark of the divine, and yet I remain undivided. What does that mean? Let's unpack this truth. It can be compared to the nature of space. Space remains undivided. The walls in our home are erected and seem to divide it. Swami Ranganatha explains the discovery of the Atman is the discovery of a wonderful truth, that in this tiny body, such a profound truth is hidden. So the Upanishads addressed all human beings as Amritasya Putraha, children of immortality. And Vivekananda summed this up in two immortal statements. Each soul is potentially divine, and the goal of life is to manifest this divinity within. How? Vivekananda tells us. By controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, the four yogas, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. So this spark of the divine draws to itself the mind and the five sense organs, products of Prakriti. It becomes conditioned as our psychophysical being. Swami Prabhupada in his Gita commentary explains, though this Atman is the eternal subject, witness to everything, including the mind, through ignorance we identify with the body and with any thought arising in the mind. It is as though we have put on a garment and have identified ourselves with it. In doing so, we seem to be separate, and thus we suffer. But in truth, whether we know it or not, we are never separate from God, not even for a moment. And this is the experience illumined souls have when they walk amongst us. They see that light within each one of us. And that is why they love us unconditionally. So what is this experience? Swami Subodhananda, direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, once told Swami Prabhupada, now I have reached a state where I know that the Atman is separate from the body, mind, and senses. This is an actual experience, deep and profound. Sri Ramakrishna used to compare this state to that of a dried coconut. He said, it is very difficult to separate with a knife the kernel of a coconut from the shell before the milk inside has dried up. When the milk dries up, the kernel rattles inside the shell. At that time, it loosens itself from the shell. Then the fruit is called a dry coconut. The sign of a man's having realized God is that he has become like a dried coconut. Prabhupada Swami explained, such a soul lives in the body, thinks thoughts, and experiences through the senses, but is separate from them. Such a soul has become the eternal witness. And in this connection, Prabhupada Swami was asked about Christ on the cross. Did he suffer? And Swami said, he was the ripe coconut. So even more so than you and me, if we attain to that state, he was an avatar, Son of God. He was a ripe coconut. And the Swami said he did not suffer at all. And in fact, the wonderful passages in the Gnostic Gospels where that particular Leela, that Christ Leela, is depicted as Christ on the cross and the devotees underneath in joyous ecstasy. Because a ripe coconut, such as Jesus, was in samadhi many times. And why not at that moment? And when one goes into samadhi, especially an incarnation of God, that atmosphere penetrates the people around. It absolutely uplifts us. So yes, there is a place for vicarious atonement. We see that in the life of Sri Ramakrishna with Girish Ghosh and others. Yes. And Christ as an avatar also had that power of vicarious atonement. But he was also the supreme yogi, Son of God. For those direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, we wonder, how does such a soul behave when they are that ripe coconut? Swami used to tell us, in the days of the direct disciples, we saw gods acting like men. And in this connection, Miss Waldo, who was distantly related to Ralph Waldo Emerson, described, devotee of the New York Center, described a profound memory she had of Swami Vivekananda in 1894. It was in a New York drawing room with high folding doors at one end and two large windows at the other end, and in between a mirror from floor to ceiling. And this mirror seemed to fascinate the Swami. Vivekananda stood before it again and again, gazing at himself intently. In between, he walked up and down the room, lost in thought. And Miss Waldo's eyes followed him anxiously. Oh, now the bubble is going to burst, she thought. He is full of personal vanity. But suddenly Vivekananda turned to her and said, Ellen, it is the strangest thing. I cannot remember how I look. I look and look at myself in the glass, but the moment I turn away, I forget completely what I look like. This state is the after effect of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. A person is no longer limited by a physical body. In Vivekananda's own words, one day in the Kasipur garden, I expressed my prayer for Nirvikalpa Samadhi to Sri Ramakrishna with great earnestness. Then in the evening, at the hour of meditation, I lost consciousness of the body and felt that it was absolutely non-existent. I felt that the sun, moon, time, ether, and all had been reduced to a homogeneous mass and then melted far away into the unknown. Body consciousness almost vanished, and I nearly merged in the Supreme. But I had just a trace of the feeling of ego, so I could again return to the world of relativity from samadhi. In this state of samadhi, all difference between I and Brahman goes away. Everything is reduced to unity, like the water of the infinite ocean. Water everywhere, nothing else exists. Language and thought all fail there. Then only is the state beyond mind and speech realized in its actuality. In the Mundaka Upanishad, we find a description of this transformative experience that instantaneously and completely reconfigures one's psychophysical being. The Upanishad goes, the knot of the heart, which is ignorance, the granthis of the heart, is loosed. All doubts are dissolved. All evil effects of deeds are destroyed when he who is both personal and impersonal is realized. But until that time comes, what is the practical relevance of Advaita here, right here and now? What is the gain, Vivekananda asks his audience in his lecture, The Vedanta, delivered in Lahore, 1897? It is strength, he says. I may be a little bubble and you may be a wave mountain high. But know that for both of us, the infinite ocean is the background. The infinite Brahman is our magazine of power and strength, and we can draw as much as we like. Believe, therefore, in yourselves. But, Vivekananda then points out, one defect which lay in the Advaita was its being worked out so long on the spiritual plane only. Now, he says, the time has come when you have to make it practical. Therefore, raise once more that mighty banner of Advaita, for on no other ground can you have that wonderful love until you see that the same Lord is present everywhere. Unfurl that banner of love. How? By serving the living God. And now I'd like to end with a guided meditation that Vivekananda gave at Camp Taylor with a few Western disciples in the giant redwoods. American student Ida Ansel, who passed away in the Vedanta Society of Southern California, remembered, I close my eyes and see him, Vivekananda, standing there in the soft blackness with sparks from the blazing log fire flying through it and a day-old moon above. Swami said to us, you may meditate on whatever you wish, but I shall meditate on the heart of a lion. That gives strength. So let us sit straight in our chairs or on the floor. Again, hands loosely held, like Vivekananda's. And let us take in 3 deep breaths, breathing in strength and expelling all weakness, all low, mundane thoughts. Now picture the lion in the heart. The heart is the center of our sense of identity, the center of our being. Let us dwell on the spiritual qualities represented by the lion. It radiates strength, fearlessness, majesty, mastery, freedom. The lion is a creature of the savannah. It has no enemies and therefore fears no one. It knows that it is a match for all circumstances. Let us feel we are established in that strength. Know you are free. Strength blazes from the eyes of the lion. It illumines our heart. It courses outward into the thought channels of our mind. Our veins, sinews of our arms, hands, feet. Our body is filled with strength. Our mind is established in strength. We know the self The Atman fears nothing, not even death. We are centered in that which transcends time, space, and all that belongs to this fleeting world of matter. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.